We are ready.
Are we ready, everybody? Looks like it. Well, welcome to the great morning, cooler than it was last week, so that's nice. We going to start doing our budget hearings today. And guess what? David's here today and not in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Last year he done it from Hawaii. So.
Oh, that's next week.
Oh, next week. Oh, okay. After it's all done, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going to call this meeting to order. It's pretty close to 9 o'clock. Let's see. Is there any additions to the agenda? None?
There are no additions.
Okay. And the following items will be discussed on a non-appointment basis, not necessarily in the order listed. At 10:30, we're going to take a 15-minute break. And they got goodies back there, and I want to eat some of them. So since we're not having closed session, so we got to get some of those. And we will have the invocation from Pastor Fred from the New Life Assembly. And Cindy, would you want to lead the flag salute? Put her on the spot.
Good morning.
No, we're doing
Okay.
yeah.
I was there, but okay, maybe they're going the other way.
I was doing that too. Maybe this
Yeah, there we go. No. Heavenly Father, we thank you as we gathered here today, Lord, to conduct business for the county of Madera. We thank you, Lord, as they deal with the budget sessions. Father, you give great wisdom and insight into things, and Lord, that the budget will work out, and all the departments and those that need funding will be taken care of. And we thank you for it, Lord, as you work in our midst. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Fred and Cindy, very much. Number 2. Read that up, Karen.
Public comment. The first 15 minutes of each regular session are set aside for members of the public to address the board on any matter under the jurisdiction of the board, but not appearing on the agenda. The board will not take action on any items presented under public comment. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Anyone addressing the board is asked to print their name clearly on the speaker sheet at the podium and state their name and county of residence for the record.
Any public comment? Any online? I just got one. I'm going to announce it tomorrow too. Our California Insurance Commissioner, Richard Lara, is having a workshop on the FAIR Plan Wednesday, and I have all the stuff if anybody wants to know to get on, and it's a Zoom meeting, and hoping a lot of people get on it to try to see if they can change that FAIR Plan. Most of you down here hasn't that problem we have up there. My insurance was canceled twice by Lloyd's of London and Hartford, and it used to be $1,700, and now it's over $7,000, and it still don't cover everything, so sucks. So, meanwhile, back at the ranch here, so there's no other public comment? Okay, 2022-23 budget hearings will continue day to day until concluded. So if we have to go through the whole week, we'll just go through the whole week. All matters listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion, but we don't have anything under, right? No consent calendar. So 9:04, we are going to open up our public hearing and start having the budget hearings and tell us what we're going to be doing and not doing.
3A, Administrative Officer's Overview and Presentation of the 2022-2023 Proposed County Budget and Special Revenue Budgets with direction as needed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Jay Varney, your CAO. We do have a format pretty similar to what we've used in years past. I just have a few remarks at the beginning, and then Joel will lead off with some minor corrections that we made to your documents and to do the PowerPoint for the budget presentation. So this year's budget, as approved, was just over $466 million. That's an increase over last year. We tried to, on the revenue side, adopt a fairly conservative, if not very conservative, outlook on where things are going, partly due to it. We feel that's a better budget practice, and partly due to some talk about recessions and other things. So we just wanted to make sure we did not overextend ourselves. On page Roman numeral 3, you see the finals for 2021, the year-end projected finals, and then our proposed budget for 22-23. Again, we can answer any questions you have for that. Probably better answered after we do the PowerPoint presentation, so we certainly can return to those numbers at the board's pleasure. On page Roman numeral 4, you have the funded positions. Now, keep in mind that these positions include positions that you've already approved in the current budget year, but you approved them at mid-year, so they weren't in the final budget for this year. So you have a substantial number that come from what we refer to as subvetted. That would be behavioral health, public health, social services, and child support services. You have a substantial number of other positions, the majority of which tend to be grant funded or funded by some source other than the general fund. Some are cleanup, some are funded from things like development impacts. You see on bullet point number 4 on page number 4, we don't refer to Cerro Viejo or Riverstone, as both are under certain items in their development agreement. They have to add additional sheriff's deputies as they grow. So we just referred to it in one large thing as Rio Mesa, as that is the Rio Mesa area. We have some additional staff both at the DA's office and for probation based on changes to how the courts run, how adults that used to be housed as adults are now housed at the juvenile hall and things of that nature. And then we're also requesting to convert a number of animal services positions to full-time versus extra help to better deal with the actual load that we have. And then, sorry, I seem to be cutting
Turn
out
the
here.
page. Yeah. You want to remember those
Yeah,
books?
yeah. Supervisor Porthers could probably sing that song for us. So, with that advice, I will turn the page, and you have both on page 4 and on page 5 of the CAO summary, you have the actual positions. And that gives you the breakdown of what was already approved mid-year, fiscal year 2021, 2022, and what the proposed is. So when you look at the bottom number and you see 98 versus 52, we're not proposing 98 positions today. You've already approved previously through action that you've taken. You've already approved 52 of those 98 positions. So that will help you. You compare that with page 4. That helps you see where the money is going to those positions. Page 7 is a synopsis of all the infrastructure things we're getting done. Page 8 is a bar graph of where these positions are going. Keep in mind that under public protection, there's a lot of things that go in there that we don't classically think of. That's not just sheriff's office and fire. It's sheriff's office, fire, probation, animal services. It's even, I think, some of the water positions, because Sigma and those things, the GSP that we're trying to implement, those definitely have a public protection component to them. And then the final page, final 2 pages are a synopsis or an overview, which is probably better handled in the PowerPoint, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have on the cover memo for the budget.
Can't read your writing. You
Yeah.
signed it.
It seems to get more and more scribbly the older and older you get. So, okay, with that, we're going to move on to Joel.
Is there any questions from the board on that?
I have a question.
Oh, yes,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Like, do you want us to ask questions during each budget, or do you want us to hold off on our questions?
Yes, Supervisor. What we would recommend, as in prior years, is we go through the PowerPoint presentation if there are specific issues or concerns on a particular department that's highlighted in the overview, we would recommend that your board discuss it once we get to that department.
Right, because otherwise we might not remember everything, they have to go back on everything in PowerPoint or what have you, so.
Yes, sir.
We'll do it as we need questions.
I always look at the budget process as a learning process too for everybody. And as we discuss it, it helps everybody understand it better. They might have the same question. So it's a good time to ask it when you find it.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going into the next item is introducing the revised pages. Could we? Yes. Your budget books have been, there are 5 documents that were revised. I just want to kind of go over it real quick. The letter to the board, as mentioned earlier, the appropriation summary, the 22-23 numbers in both of these documents aren't incorrect. There is an extra line in the appropriation summary that was meant to be an internal subtotal that somehow made it into the final. That got deleted in the revised page. The 3 documents, the last 3 documents are 3 position summaries for child support and 2 for the sheriff's office. Again, the 22-23 numbers are correct. We had a rogue formula in the year-on-year change that was totaling incorrectly, and those have been fixed. Copies to the public have been provided both online and in the back of the room. Oh. Right. So the 22-23 recommended budget, as Jay had mentioned, is $466 million under the CAO proposed. It is $4 million lower than the $470 million that departments have requested. Over the last few months, our office and the departments have worked closely to try to reduce the, try to balance the need of the departments to address current services and their need to alleviate some inflationary issues as far as services and supplies, and get to a number that could still be manageable and be feasible to recommend to the board for adoption. The general fund at $374 million is a 12% increase from the prior year. That's a total of $41 million increase. Majority of that, approximately half of that, are health and human services programs, both staffing and services. $16 million are into public protection. There is a new public works revolving fund program that we will discuss once we get to that budget. That's worth $3 million. It's reimbursable activities that we're proposing to provide a $3 million revolving cash flow loan so that they'll be able to implement a lot more of these fully funded state and federal projects that are reimbursable but don't come with an advance. And then in the other category, we want to point out that the $5.7 million increase is largely the carryover of $4 million of the sheriff assigned vehicle program that your board approved to be funded under ARPA.
All right.
Because of the delay, we have to carry that forward to the next budget year. And the rest of that really is the escalation in fuel prices and supplies. Looking at the 5-year comparison, the majority of the increase have gone into public protection, highlighting your board's priority to adequately fund public protection services, which are important for the community. Social service programs account for a large increase of the public assistance. As with prior years, those are subvented dollars, are mandated programs, and the state and the federal government define the criteria of how to administer those programs. The large increase in the general government and fiscal group is largely due to that $3 million Public Works revolving fund program. It is not for any expenses that will be funded with discretionary revenues. It is a proposal to just dislodge and move on fully funded state and federal projects. And last, we want to highlight the $300,000 increase in library services. Again, continue your board's commitment to, in whatever way we can, that we can afford to divert resources and improve the library system. Your board has seen this chart before. We call it affectionately the Pac-Man chart. But really what this highlights is that out of the $466 million county budget, 79% of it is non-discretionary, meaning there's some restriction placed on it, whether it's state, federal, or fee-type revenues. 21% of the county budget, approximately $96.9 million, is what we call discretionary. It is actually a 1% increase from the prior year relative to the whole budget. And that 96 million is broken down. 70% of that is spent on public protection. We wanted to highlight that in the prior year, 65% of discretionary revenues went into public protection. In the proposed budget, that percentage is 70%. General government is a decrease of from 29% to 23% of discretionary revenues, even though the overall number has increased. Library services has shown a 0.2% increase relative to the total. In the other category, that 100,000 is the county's contribution to the cooperative extension. We belong to the Fresno Madera Cooperative Extension, use extension services. And last but not the least, the public assistance has 4.2% of discretionary. This $4 million represent mandated matches for all the programs. These are not something that we have any discretion on. We have to match those programs.
Any questions? Okay.
So the general fund financial outlook is a sheet that we started last year. Once we tried to quantify on a 5-year basis, how are we doing in reducing the structural deficit that the county has. If we focus on the fiscal year 22-23 recommended budget, we want to highlight that out of the 96.9 million in discretionary expenditures that we have, approximately 4.1 million of that is what we would anticipate be as a result of salary savings. If your board remembers last year, as part of the measures to tackle the deficit, is we had recommended a 9% salary savings target. That has been met this year, but with the recovery of the revenues for the recommended 22-23, we have set salary savings targets or estimates based on the more realistic 5% average across all departments. Discretionary revenue funds is projected to be just over $88 million, resulting in a structural operating deficit of 4.7. The beginning fund balance is projected to be 17.5. With the 4.7 deficit, we project the fund balance to be 12.8. And like CEO Varney has mentioned, this is based on a conservative projection of revenues. We are hoping that that's smaller. And for reference, I want to highlight that in this sheet, it projects the structural deficit to be 3.5 million in fiscal year 24-25. When we created this sheet a year ago, the projected structural deficit for fiscal year 24-25 is $5.5 million. So that, although we're not there yet and there's still a lot of work to do, there is progress in that number. We also want to point out that last year, we estimated the ending fund balance for fiscal year 24-25 to be 1.8 million. We're now projecting that to be a 4.7. So again, an improvement, but by no means the work is not done. To put that in context, in order for your board to appreciate the progress we've made, this includes the estimated impacts of salary studies and labor negotiations to the best that we can at this moment. I know we're not all ratified, we're not all approved, but there is a projection that's baked in on this. And then as far as revenues, again, the projection for 23-24 and 24-25 is on the conservative side of what we're projecting. So the 22-23 recommended positions, we began the fiscal year with 1,524, and I apologize with the conflicting number, the 52, I kind of wanted to clarify, 52 is outside of the 98. 52 is the total positions that were added mid-year of 21-22. 39 of that is from the subvented departments to address various programs, to address extra help issues. So in the middle of the year, based on human resources analysis, that we needed the long-term use of extra help cannot be sustained. So there is a move of those departments to do a one-for-one to go away from what we call high use of temporary salaries. So that's what the majority of those are. The rest are really development related. There are 2 positions that are related to building and fire safety. There's 1 position that was funded at the CAO's office, and that was the position that was funded to address ARPA reporting. Those will be fully offset with ARPA dollars. In the recommended budget, let me get the next slide. As Jay had covered earlier, the majority of those positions are from the Departments of Behavioral Health, Child Support, Health, and Social Services. Again, fully subvented, again, dealing with the changeover in the use of permanent as opposed to extra help. The 5 positions that are either partially funded or fully funded with the grant revenues and direct funding developer agreements, these are positions from community economic development and public works planning. These do not impact discretionary revenues. Again, they increase or decrease based on the level of development projected for the fiscal year. 8 positions are for central services functions that are partially funded, approximately 60%, with subvented dollars, with the remainder funded with discretionary revenues. These are for positions that support grants maintenance, which is a function that has not increased since the end of the Great Recession, even though we have added a significant amount of facilities. So in order to keep our buildings maintained, at least in the ground side, and keep the values up and both, to look presentable to the public, these are important positions to add. There's a position at the mailroom, which is under the clerk recorder's office, to allow some backups, and 2 positions for the treasurer tax collector, and another position for the clerk recorder elections. 43 positions are from various general fund departments that are mostly funded with discretionary revenues. 15 of those are from the library and animal services, again, to address the extra help use. This does not result in a full $1, one-for-one increase, but this just represents in the budget the incremental increase in cost between using a 40 hours a week extra help versus a full-time position. There are 8 positions in the sheriff's office to address training needs, emergency response, the workload at the morgue, jail operations, and majority of those positions are providing services for the Rio Mesa area, which are offset by the developer agreements. There are 2 positions in the district attorney's office that address the superior court workload and staff support functions. 14 positions in probation, mainly to address the Department of Juvenile Justice realignment, pretrial and adult drug court workloads, and a shift of positions that were temporarily funded with grant funding during the Great Recession, but we now have to move it back to the general fund. We have been working with probation to transition this back out of the grant funding. This is the last batch of positions that were temporarily funded when the county had a fiscal crisis. 3 positions in animal services, which reflects a true ask, and we're going to go deeper more once we get into animal services. This is based on the recommendation of the Animal Services Director to properly address the current workload. And there are strategies recommended for the board to discuss these positions once we get to that budget. And then finally, 1 position in the library to handle book delivery functions outside of the main branch. What had happened here is that for a period of time that San Joaquin Library System was delivering directly to the libraries, the agreement that we have with that is to deliver to the main branch, and we're responsible to deliver that. They have finally since enforced that, so then our county librarian has recommended a position to handle logistics. And the final slide is a summary of what the staff recommends to continue in order for us to make progress in the structural deficit. As mentioned earlier, salary savings targets have been reset to the normal 5% with very few exceptions. Some are lower, some are at 0. If your department is a department of 4, we can't really set you a 5% salary savings target. So we do pay attention that we work with departments. The recommended budget continues to reduce debt service by prepaying debt to the maximum amount that will not incur any penalties. In the recommended budget, $314,000 is included in the special payments to prepay debt early. Continue to identify opportunities to reduce ongoing operating costs through energy efficiency projects, like the one we have in Road 28, which we hope to become interconnected with PG&E before the end of the calendar year. And last is to leverage emerging and evolving programs so that collaboration can be fostered with departments. A big example for this is CalAIM, which redraws how we handle a lot of services, mostly related to the services we provide to our unhoused citizens. So our focus in the next fiscal year is to make sure that between the sheriff jail operations and the human services and the things that were done in the homelessness and other community and with behavioral health and social services, that we look at it strategically so we can fund as much of those services through this new model.
On that solar system, is that, I thought it was already hooked up.
It is completely built. There is a equipment issue with PG&E where they had initially approved a particular part and now they're not accepting it. So we're working with the contractor to resolve those so that we can finally be recognized that the generation is generating. It's just not interconnected, so we're not getting the benefit of it.
Oh,
We're
we're not
hoping that we
getting
do that sooner than later.
Okay.
It will save. We are having a true up of a couple $100,000 because of that, and we
Right.
would eliminate that true up and save $200,000 instantly in utilities once that becomes interconnected.
Right. Any other questions from the board?
I have one.
Yeah, no, go
So
ahead.
Joel, as we look at the extra help and determine and decide, if extra help needs to become permanent, are you looking at some of the contract services that we provide, like specifically like interpretation contracts?
Our office hasn't been involved specifically on that. Really, not that we can't look at that part, but this is really in reaction to the review the Human Resources Department has done on positions and extra help use. I think the first step of the process is to make sure we're on the okay in terms of extra help use, that if they're here year after year and they're 40 hours, it's time that we add a permanent and reduce those. So there's a lot of cleanup. There was a lot of review that went on together with HR, and those are the positions that are reflected largely in this budget. We have not been involved specifically in looking at whether a contracted service would be better served by adding a permanent position. So certainly that's something your board.
I would love to see the analysis for it, because we utilize it. Well, we've seen that we've utilized an interpreter or have tried to. So I'd like to see an analysis on that in the future.
We can add that to the budget follow-up discussions.
Any other questions? And none?
Are you?
Oh, yes, Dave, I'm
Are you
sorry.
going to cover, under flood control, you're going to cover that separately as well? Because I noticed there's a line item.
Yeah, when specific questions on the flood control budget, we would recommend that we handle that. I know Stephanie is
Right.
here to be able to answer any questions.
Right.
Okay. Any others? Did I ask for the public to comment on this or not? Wait to the end.
Chair, I would wait till the end until staff is done with their presentation, but you can ask for comment all along the way if you'd like.
Yeah, I think just in case somebody does have a question out here. So anyone from the public or from our employees? Any online? Is there anybody online?
There's nobody online.
Oh, good. Don't worry about that then. Moving on.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first budget for your consideration, the first group of budgets for your consideration are the public safety budgets, which begins with the child support services budget on page 1 of the budget book. Total recommended budget of $4,510,163 represent an increase of $875,557 from the current fiscal year, and is primarily due to the addition of 2 funded positions in state-directed customer service activities. This budget has 39 funded positions, all of them which are recommended. Sarah Honeycutt, Director of Child Support Services, is available for any questions.
Questions? None. Moving on.
I see that there's no revenues, so that means all the revenues go directly to who they're intended to go to, right? The child. Because I know you bring in a lot of money.
Yeah, about $10 million a year so far, maybe 11 this year. We're allocated because we're a Senate department.
You got to say your name and pull the microphone over to you.
Sarah Honeycutt, Madera County Child Support Services Director. the income that we receive is from the state and fed allocation that they provide us. We
Which
bring
means
in,
the money that you collect goes straight to who it's supposed to go to.
it goes either back to the state and federal government, or it goes back to, or goes to the children.
Okay.
And there's new policy that's coming up that will do a full pass-through, so all arrears will go back to the families and not back to the state. They'll stop the recoupment of welfare.
That seems like what it should be doing. So I just wanted to point that out.
It's on
Thank
the
you.
budget bill this year.
Good. Let us know if we need to support that.
The next set of budgets for your consideration are the district attorney's office budgets, which begins on page 9 of the budget book. Total recommended budget of $7,958,872 represent an increase of $400,178 from the current fiscal year, and is primarily due to the addition of 2 funded positions to address a new court and superior court and address support staff needs in the department. This department has a total of 51 positions. Assistant District Attorney Jeff Dupras is available for any question.
Any questions on the district attorney? Don't see none.
The next set of budgets for your consideration are the sheriff's office budgets, which begin on page 41 of the budget book and includes the budget for the sheriff's jail division. The total recommended budget of $54,034,927 represent an increase of $5,815,211 from the current fiscal year. The increase is due to a few factors, one of which are the cost of the ratified labor agreements, and projected cost of a salary study being conducted by the Human Resources Department that's related to public safety positions. The Sheriff's Office is recommending funding 10 additional positions for next year. This include 3 positions in the Sheriff's main budget to address deputy training and additional staff to accommodate dispatch workload. 2 positions are for the Cerro Viejo development, 1 position to support workload at the morgue, 3 positions for the Riverstone development, and then 1 position at the jail. This department has a total of 279 funded positions, if all are approved. Tyson Pogue, Madera County Sheriff, is available for any questions.
Any questions on that one?
The, any positions into Cerro Viejo is funded through that CSA, is that correct?
That is correct. There is it is funded with the property tax increment that's earned through that development.
Right.
Same thing with Riverstone. The property tax increment received there funds those.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
The next set of budgets for your consideration are the probation budgets, which begin with the juvenile hall budget on page 185 of the budget book. The total recommended budget of $22,536,153 represent an increase of $2,333,673 from the current fiscal year. The increase is primarily due to the projected cost of the salary study being conducted by the Human Resources Department, and the transfer of 5 positions that were temporarily funded with programs that are grant funded during the recession and have now been fully returned to the general fund. The probation department reflects a net increase of 10 funded positions, which includes 4 positions in juvenile hall, 5 positions in the main budget, and 1 position for the AB 109 org. This department has a total of 128 positions. Chris Childress, Chief of Probation, is available for any questions.
Any questions on the probation? None? Moving on.
The next set of budgets for your consideration are the fire department budgets, which begin on page 241 of the budget book. The total recommended budget of $30,554,411 represent an increase of $1,788,058 over the current fiscal year. This increase is primarily due to the increase in benefit costs negotiated by the state with its bargaining units. This department has 6 county-funded positions that provide admin support and equipment maintenance for the fire assets. It remains at 6 funded positions for the budget year, and there's 38 positions in the cooperative agreement with CAL FIRE. Assistant Chief Watson is available for any questions.
Question from Mr. Matt. Seeing none. No questions. You're free to go.
The next budget for your consideration is the Agriculture Commissioner's budget, which includes the budget for predatory animal control and begins on page 267 of the budget book. The total recommended budget of $2,642,848 represents an increase of $361,037 from the current fiscal year and is primarily due to the replacement of the county weights and measures heavy-duty truck. This budget has 17 allocated positions, of which 2 are unfunded, and reflects the deletion of an unfunded agriculture and standards inspector 1, 2, 3, or an agriculture and standards technician. Rusty Landsberger, Ag Commissioner, is available for any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none. Moving on.
The next budget for your consideration is the Community and Economic Development Planning Division budget, which begins on page 279. The recommended budget for the Planning Division is $4,531,970, which represents a $501,017 increase over the current fiscal year and is primarily due to the cost of recommended staff. The department has 17 allocated positions, of which are currently funded. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next one and then ask for Matt to come up. The next budget for your consideration is the Community and Economic Development Building and Fire Safety Division budget, which begins on page 289. The recommended budget for the Building and Fire Safety Division is $4,898,742, which represents a $1,309,875 increase over the current fiscal year and is primarily due to the cost of professional and specialized services for an anticipated need of outside contractors for specialized plan checking and inspectors due to new development in the county. The department has 30 allocated positions, which is an increase of 2 positions from the current fiscal year. Matt Treber, Chief of Development Services, is available for any questions on these 2 budgets.
Any question from Hopalong? Yes,
Yeah,
go
one
ahead.
quick question on that. The expenditure on professional and specialized services is directly submitted by the users, am I correct?
Thank you, Supervisor Rogers. Matt Treber, Chief of Development Services. That is correct. As I think we all realize, there's been a huge uptick in the development world and the building world. So yes, this is for our outside plan checkers and inspector services.
Yeah, I can't stress enough how important that is, because when they get behind, everything gets behind.
Yeah.
And
People start calling us.
it's absolutely critical. So thank you for keeping up on that.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Matt.
The next set of budgets for your consideration is the County GSA's budget, previously titled Water and Natural Resources, which includes the new budget for drought and begins on page 299 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $7,771,907 represents a $3,628,361 increase over the current fiscal year, primarily due to professional and specialized services to pay for specialized engineering and geotechnical services related to the GSA. The department has 10 allocated positions, of which are all funded. The next budget for your consideration is the Flood Control Services Fund, which begins on page 307 of the budget book. This budget is not part of the general fund and is a separate enterprise fund. It provides funding for flood system repair and other grant-funded projects. The recommended expenditures of $578,881 represent a decrease of $819,365 from the previous fiscal year, primarily due to a decrease in professional and specialized services. Stephanie Magnuson, Director of Water and Natural Resources, is available for any comments or questions your board has on the county GSAs and the flood control budget.
Okay, David's got a question.
Yeah, to me, there is a nexus between the Arundo cleaning the sloughs and, of course, groundwater recharge. And also, there's another nexus, and that is fire protection. There is a third nexus in building, because the decertification of levees make it impossible to ensure projects within the flood control areas. So that's a third nexus. Then the fourth nexus I'm going to bring up is homelessness. And homeless issues in the slough have been a huge problem. By the way, I want to thank Mike Motz, as well as the Officer Delgado and quite a few others who have been involved, Brandon Medellin, who've been involved in this process, taking care of those issues in the slough. And that's a big, if you don't think that's an issue, we are eating up resources like crazy on that. And the homeless issue is a migratory issue. They're coming from Merced and Fresno and finding a home in our sloughs. And it's becoming a real problem. And these camps are 20, 30 people at a time. And they bring with them tons and tons of garbage. And I exaggerate not, tons of garbage. In addition to multiple other problems that they create. There's a lot of thievery and what have you that goes on. The reason I'm dwelling on that for this particular issue, I believe if you eliminate the habitat, you eliminate part of the problem. They're there because they can conceal themselves in the habitat. And if you remove the Arundo, which is an objective we have anyway for flood control, for certifying the channels, they should be adequate to convey a certain number of CFS, and they're not there because of the Arundo and the vegetation. So I think we really need to look hard at how we can fund the removal of that Arundo through the flood control district, because it's going to serve multiple purposes. I hope I made myself clear on that. And do we have an opportunity to hear from Stephanie on that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
She's up there for
Sure. Thank you, Supervisor Stephanie and Agneson, Director of Water and Natural Resources. We actually have an update in July on the permit, which was restricting our ability to do that. So we did get what's called a CDFW, Fish and Wildlife 1602 permit. So we do have the ability to go in there now. We have to send a biologist out. There's other restrictions, but we have that ability, which we did not have for the previous 4 years.
Right.
So that said, flood control receives naturally only about $250,000 a year, which is a very small amount for a lot of channel cleaning. So we rely on partnerships with, for example, Chowchilla Water District to actually go in and do that work. But right. I think everybody would agree Arundo is a top priority. So is the rest of the vegetation removal, and it does impact the capacity in the channels.
Yeah, I would suggest that we need to prioritize the locations in which we begin removal, because I noticed a great example of the effect of the removal is the Fresno River. Look at the Fresno River, how they clean that up through the town. And do you see any homeless tents there anymore? Not a one. Zero. And I think that's really key to this whole thing. And a bell went off in my head when I saw that, and I was thinking, boy, we need to do this all over. And I would suggest that, especially up against the cities, like in Chowchilla, we have the ash slough is especially a target of the homeless, because they can occupy that north end of town there and move in and out of town. And they're literally parking in the neighborhoods and walking out into the sloughs at night and building their fires. And it's a bad situation. So I think how we target the Arundo removal for these flood control channels is really going to be key. And so I'd love to work closely with your office on this issue. I know Matt Skolnick and I have had this discussion, and I think it's going to benefit in 1,000 ways, as you heard. There are so many So many things that can happen as a result of this. Thank you.
Yeah, you know what happens when they do that, don't you?
What's
They move
that?
into your backyard.
Go elsewhere, yeah.
Well, you mean Brenda
Homeless,
slew? Yeah. Yeah, they'll come to Brenda and we'll cut that down too.
On the county GSAs, I just wanted to point out the increase was from a huge increase in the state water grant. So it's and if you look also then on like the overall administration within the GSA, it actually came down in terms of salaries, employee benefits by about 20,000. So it's not growing the bureaucracy, it's growing the actual projects being delivered and the things that are the work that's actually being done to the benefit of the sub-basin. So I thought that was important to point out that it's not growing within the office, it's growing within what's actually being done
Projects.
in terms of projects. So
Thank you.
That'd be a good thing for us to line item in the future as far as like projects and to separate that out from that overall budget so that it's very clear what is going on in that department for the general public. I think is really important, especially now with the questions concerning those projects. That's a really key issue. Thank you.
Okay. Any other ones? None? Thank you, Steph.
Thank you.
Next.
The next budget for your consideration is the Local Agency Formation Commission budget, which begins on page 313 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $65,093 represent a $52,149 increase over the current fiscal year. This increase is attributed to the county's anticipated contribution for the fiscal year. We are available for any questions.
No, so people know last year we actually lowered our budget because we had some excess, so we just bring it back up now. Right, boss? Yep. Next.
The next budget for your consideration is the Animal Services budget, which begins on page 315 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $1,851,675 represents a $411,629 increase over the current fiscal year and is primarily due to the cost of recommended staff in the proposed spay and neuter program. This budget has 20 allocated positions, of which are all recommended funded. Cindy Avila, Animal Services Director, is available for any questions.
I think that's very, very important. It seems like, I don't know, even the homeless bring in their animals. So we have so many more animals now. It's unbelievable, and they're doing a great job. So thank you, Cindy.
I have
very
a
much.
question.
Yes, you got a question?
Are we operating at full capacity or where are we at?
Chairman.
I think the microphone.
Good morning, Chairman Wheeler, members of the board. Cindy Avila, Animal Shelter. If I may say a few words before I answer questions, okay?
Yep.
Okay. All right, first, I'd like to thank all of you for your continued support in my department. You supported the recommendations from Team USA in 2019, which we have been following ever since. We started the transition immediately after the results of the assessment were given, and with your direction, we've made great strides. It would not have been possible without your support and the support of administration. Thank you. We want to be known as a resource center as well as a shelter that the Board of Supervisors and the community will be proud of. Since 2019, we've decreased intake by 1,500 animals. In 2021-22, 727 dogs were impounded by the city and 864 dogs were impounded by the county. 21-22, 266 cats from the city, 288 from the county. As you can see, it's about half and half. We're running city, county is almost equal to the amount of animals. And we do have a huge influx of homeless animals from homeless people coming in. We've partnered with Best Friends, Maddie's Fund, and California for All Animals, which is the people that did the assessment. We meet with them Zoom calls monthly. I mean, we've been reaching out to every person we can possibly think of for help. We've partnered with over 50 rescue groups who come to our shelter and take animals, but it's still not enough. We've received $60,000 in grant money, which have helped with medical and other expenses we have at the shelter. We're offering free microchips to everybody, which helps us get the animals returned. Extent we know where they live, we can get them back home, don't have to bring them into the shelter. We've developed enrichment policies and procedures for the animal shelter. We've raised over $20,000 for medical funds just through fundraisers. We've revamped our volunteer program. With your okay, we lowered adoption fees for 3 months. We've partnered with Home to Home, which is a agency that helps people rehome their animals rather than bring them to the shelter. We're using DocuPet and GoodPup, which is an online training program that we offer to the public. We started an automatic texting program that helps people with lost, found, or to rehome licensing, evacuations, everything they need to know. They just text a number and they get that information. And in spite of all of this, it's just not enough. We need more support. Spay-neuter vouchers for community cats is and dogs. FMAS in 2019, which was the only spay-neuter fund we had, spent $200,000 in that year. COVID year 2020, it dropped to $94,000, but that was only because all the vets were closed and nobody could go anywhere to get their animals spayed, which has also caused a huge influx of animals in our county. We do have one Nuts and Bolts. It's a very small 501(c) that has hung in there with me and has been working with me to get some of the feral and community cats spayed and neutered this year. They have, in 2020, they did 500. And this year alone, in just the first 5 months, they've already done 300. So it is just out of control. I mean, just doubling as we speak. The shelter took in 100 cats in May alone, and we don't even take in cats, but we are required by law to take in sick, injured, or orphaned. And we are just inundated with little sick kitties that we have to treat and care for and then somehow find a way to place them. In 6 years, one unaltered pair of dogs can result in 67,000 dogs and puppies. And with cats, it's even worse. In 8 years, one altered pair of cats can result in approximately 2 million cats and kittens. And I have the little flyers if anybody's interested in those breakdowns of numbers. We need help from the board as well as the citizens of Madera in order to get the handle on this crisis. And we also need additional employees. I'm requesting that 4 of our extra help positions be made permanent and add another 2. In January of 2020, when I took over as interim director, we had 9 extra help positions and 8 permanent. And extra help, I mean, we had one officer who had been there as long as 10 years and at least 5 that were there 4 or 5 years. I mean, it was just rut we got into that really needs to be rectified.
Thanks, Cindy. I think Jay said that a while ago, we're going to add 3 employees.
I think it was a conversion of 4, Supervisor, from
okay.
extra help to full-time.
Good.
Right, and then in 9 of those 17 combined positions were animal services assistants. That's all we have, a whole bunch of animal services assistants, which is basically a fancy word for kennel attendant. We do rescue, we do volunteer. I mean, we have nobody that in those positions don't even exist. That's why I'm wanting to convert some of these animal services assistants into things that we actually need, like volunteer coordinators, rescue coordinators, behavioralists. I mean, people that will actually make a difference and who are doing the job now, but at a very reduced rate. And it's extremely hard to keep people that, I mean, you have to be passionate and really want to be, working for the animal services in order to do any good and be good at, and to stay. I have people leaving left and right because they get to a certain point and, hey, Starbucks is paying more than we're getting here, let's go on. And I mean, these people, I can't afford to lose anymore. So I'm really, hoping that we can work something out. Today, the department has 13 permanent and 5 extra help. So we have, come away as far as turning that around a little bit. But, and my employees have, they're all first responders, and they work hours during disasters like the Creek Fire. And we still had all our animals at the shelter to contend with while we were participating in the Creek Fire. So, and we are a 7-day-a-week operation, and we have officers on call 24 hours a day. So we really could use some help. I have employees going above and beyond to try and help these animals, but without the board's help and the citizens, I just don't think we can do any more.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Cindy. I want to point out that in the budget narrative that we work with Animal Services is that we recommend that Animal Services return during the first quarter of the new fiscal year for a budget workshop. There are a few moving parts that address some of the issues or most of the issues that Ms. Avila has stated. Animal Services officers are part of the Peace Officers Salary Study and Classification and Compensation Study, and that we're awaiting the full results of that. It should address some of the types of classifications or job descriptions. At the same time, once everything's implemented, should address the competitiveness of those positions. What we had recommended today is that the positions related to eliminate long-term extra help use are in the budget, and those are 4. There are 3 new positions that some are related to the class study, but some are not. But those are representing a true growth of 3 FTEs. What we had recommended was to include those in the budget for funding January 1st to allow the department to provide a board workshop to basically lay the status of the animal shelter, where they want to move forward. So that way, if your board wants to tweak and amend the approved budget, that we have time to do that because they're not effective until January 1st. That's what we would recommend, is to return to address the nuances of the issues that your animal service director
David's got a question.
I think Letty still had her question.
So
be
is
answered.
the shelter full, or is it full? Are we
The
at full capacity?
shelter is full. The capacity for care of the shelter, which is you can stuff, 1,000 dogs into the shelter, but the capacity for care is what we're concerned with. That's how many people it takes to feed them, to clean them, to have enrichment. If you fill the shelter up with animals, then all you're doing is feeding, watering, and cleaning, and nothing else. You have no time to do the enrichment, to do the adoption events. And so right now we are at, there are 75 dogs in the shelter right now and 58 cats. Capacity for care for dogs is approximately 50 would be the max with the staff we have currently, and 20 would be the max on cats. So we are always, and we're relatively low this week. So this is always, we've been running 89, 90 dogs alone, with 50 being max. So we've been over capacity for a long time.
Supervisor Rogers.
Thank you.
Yeah, at some point, we've got to treat the cause and not the symptoms, or we're going to be chasing our tail, pardon the pun. We are chasing our tail now. And that means that at some point, we've got to find a way to eliminate the number of animals, bring them down, the number of animals that are coming into this county, whether it's by legislation or by another means. And I hate to use the word euthanize, but that's going to be more caring than allowing animals to starve to death and run wild out there and create more problems out there, then, that's a sad thing, but it has to happen sometimes. We need to limit the number of animals that are coming to the county, and people buy animals they can't afford, they turn them loose. I get them all the time out there in the country. They drive out there to Avenue 24 and they drop them off on the corner. My neighbors get them, I get them. And, what do you do? What do? You call the county pound and you're full. You can't take them. So this is happening a lot. This happens weekly. You know that because I call you. I call you all the time, and my people call you, and you do a great job with what you have, the resources you have. Another thought that I had along the way was the city of Madera needs to start paying its way. It's not paying its way, and we've got to hold them accountable on that side of the budget as well. The county can't be responsible for picking up everything in the city and them not paying their way. So that's an important component of this whole thing. Yeah. How do we fix that?
Well, spaying and neutering.
Legislatively, what do we do?
Spay and neutering, and I'm not talking ordinances. I'm talking spay and neuter funding.
Right.
That's the only solution is we have to spay and neuter all these animals. They're not going to stop. And we've euthanized animals over the years. I mean, thousands and thousands, and that did not curb the problem either.
Right.
Spay and neuter is the answer. I would love to see a spay and neuter clinic here in Madera to make it affordable. You legislate that you have to spay and neuter, and the people that can't afford it, that aren't doing it now, still can't afford it.
Yeah.
So it's not going to fix it by
Right.
making people,
Right.
what we have to do is help people to be able to afford to spay and neuter, help them get the animal to the vet. And
Now,
How much would a spay and neuter program cost, in your opinion?
well, I'm asking for 200,000 a year, and that would cover like 64 dogs and 100 cats a month.
Yeah,
And
just
then,
like
and
when we had that-
we would be asking for donations or minimum amount for a voucher. So we will, still get income from the voucher system. They won't just be like free to everybody. And it will, of course, be addressed to low income. And when my officers go out into an area and we come across a house that has 10 dogs because they're just all inbreeding and they just keep going and going, we would step in, get everybody fixed. Okay, that's done here. Like we're doing with cats. That's exactly what we do. We just go out and trap. I say we, this 501 that's helping the county, goes out, traps a bunch of cats, takes them to the vet, gets them all fixed, has their ears clipped so we know they're fixed, and returns them to the field. Removing animals just creates a vacuum that will fill back in with more animals. So honestly, spay and neutering is the only way to
good to
get
hear
a grip
that.
on this.
Yeah, I knew that's the big issue right there.
Mhm.
Well, what did we get, $1.5 million or something from Red Arnold?
Right, and that went,
That went so fast.
oh
I
yeah,
couldn't believe it.
that was open to everybody. There was no restrictions. And so, of course, even people that could afford it took advantage. So I'm, planning on making this a little tighter. And I think, like I said, my officers just being in the field, we know where the problems are. We know what has to be addressed.
Right.
And I do have outside people that are going to help with the trapping of the cats, because the cats are really this year just totally out of control.
Yep, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like I said, and euthanizing cats did nothing to reduce the population. We tried that for years and
Wow.
years.
Wow.
That's why we had this assessment done by the people from UC Davis. We're following the recommendations. And honestly, I mean, it's going to take time, but that is the true answer, is to get them all fixed.
Right, absolutely. Okay, any more questions? Thank you, Cindy, so much. Really appreciate what you're doing, and
Thank you.
thanks for giving us that synopsis of everything that we need to be doing, and I think you opened our eyes a little bit more.
All right.
And
Thank you
like
all.
David said, we got to get the Madera City in our tax sharing agreement, get them to start paying their fair share. I don't care what anybody says.
I think Mike Mott's got bit by a dog out there, and in Chowchilla, so he puts himself in harm's way for this county.
Those Yorkie poos are vicious.
Cindy, one other question. Cindy? Does Chowchilla, do we get very many animals from Chowchilla?
Have gotten very few, I mean, I can count them on one hand in the last few years. They're doing an excellent job
Yeah,
of
they all live at David's house.
finding rescue and not have, they used to bring
I
us
thought
all their
David was
animals for
shooting them or
euthanizing. They haven't done that in years. So,
Yeah, we have
no,
a.
Chowchilla's doing a fine job.
Great, thank you. Next.
The next budget for your consideration is the Fish and Game Fines budget, which begins on page 323 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $5,000 remains unchanged from the current fiscal year. This is not a general fund budget. We are available for any questions.
Being none.
The next budget for your consideration is the trial court operations budget, which begins on page 325 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $1,311,128 remains the same as the current fiscal year. This budget represents the county's historical share of annual operation and maintenance costs for each court facility that was transferred to state control in 2007. We are available for any questions.
Grand jury.
The next budget for your consideration is the grand jury budget, which begins on page 329 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $80,070 reflects an increase of $1,430 in communication services. We are available for any questions.
Public defender.
The next budget for your consideration is the public defender budget, which begins on page 333 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $3,951,584 remains the same as the current fiscal year. We are available for any questions.
Being none.
The next group of budgets for your consideration are the general government budgets, which begins with the Board of Supervisors budget on page 337 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $2,128,040 reflect an increase of $223,522 over the current fiscal year. This is primarily due to the updated step and longevity increases and removing salary savings, which was incorporated in the current fiscal year budget based on actual vacancies and hiring. There are 14 funded positions in this budget, which is the same as the current fiscal year. Aaron Pogue, Chief Clerk of the Board, is available for any questions.
Any questions? Put her on the spot. Come on, you guys, ask a question.
I don't know where Karen Pogue is, but Karen Scribner's here.
My bad. Got me.
Okay.
The next budget for your consideration is the administrative management budget, which begins on page 345 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $1,131,089 reflect an increase of $49,885, primarily due to the normal step increases and incremental cost of converting a vacant senior buyer into principal analyst position, and the proposed conditional funding of currently unfunded assistant CAO position, subject to board approval of creation of the actual position. There are 8 recommended funded positions in the budget, a proposed net increase of 1 funded positions when compared to the current fiscal year. Jay Varney, County Administrative Officer, is available for any questions.
Questions? Being none. Public Works.
The next set of budgets for consideration are the public works projects. I'm showing that. My apologies. This is what happens when I read from a script. The next budget for consideration is the new Public Works Projects Revolving Fund, which begins on page 351 of the budget book. This is a new budget for your board's consideration, and it's proposed for the fiscal year to provide a solution for delays in starting fully funded public works projects. State and federal public works funding for projects work on a reimbursement basis, and pre-construction activities such as project management and design are often hard to fund using grant anticipation notes. As such, this budget is aimed to cash flow pre-construction activities to allow the Public Works Department to initiate more funded projects within the fiscal year and allow it to get to a point where a grant anticipation note can be feasibly used. Funding for this budget is proposed to come from general fund balance. Cash flow loans from this budget will be 100% reimbursed through the executed state and federal funding and will earn interest in the same rate as the Treasury pool. Staff from the Admin Office and Public Works Departments are available for any questions.
Any questions on this? new item? Seeing none.
The next budget for your consideration is the 311 Customer Service Center budget, which begins on page 353 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $338,470 reflect an increase of $2,665 over the current fiscal year based on anticipated step increases. There are 4 funded positions in this budget, which reflect no change from the current fiscal year. We are available for any questions.
Any question on that? All I know is it does a great job. Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Special payments.
The next budget for your consideration is the special payments budget, which begins on page 357 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $6,235,928 reflect an increase of $66,144 over the current fiscal year based on projected debt service costs and contributions to other agencies and the cost of prepaying existing debt. There are no funded positions in this budget. We are available for any questions.
Any questions on that? Seeing none.
The next budget for your consideration is the Health and Social Services Campus budget, which begins on page 363 of the budget book. This is a pass-through budget that tracks lease payments and reimbursements from Health and Social Services departments. Recommended appropriations of $4,068,960 reflects the same level of the current fiscal year based on the lease purchase agreement for the Road 28 campus buildings. We are available for any questions.
Seeing none. Next.
The next budget is not a budget for consideration in 22-23, although we have to put it in a budget because there are actual expenditures for fiscal year 2020-21. These COVID-19 response budget were created in the early phases of the pandemic to track expenditures. There are no funds recommended for the next fiscal year, and we would be, these budgets would fall off of the budget book once the 2020-21 falls off of the 3-year reporting window. Admin staff is
Let's
available
hope
for any
they never
questions.
come back.
Yeah, sure.
Right. The next budget for your consideration is the legal and insurance budget, which begins on page 369 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $5,868,872 reflect an increase of $425,940 over the current fiscal year due to increases in the liability insurance premiums and the cost of the county's retiree health program. There are 2 funded positions in this budget, which is the same level as the current fiscal year. Admin staff is available for any questions.
Seeing
The next-
none. 377.
The next budget for consideration is the county council budget, which begins on page 377 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $1,780,000 reflect an increase of $227,450 over the current fiscal year, based on projections derived from actual expenditures incurred in the current fiscal year. The contract cap is not impacted in this proposed budget. It simply reflects the projected expenditures for county council for the next fiscal year. There are no funded positions as the county council is a contracted service. Admin staff is available for any questions.
Questions on that? None, Brett? Okay.
Right. The next budget for your consideration is the human resources budget, which begins on page 381 of the budget book and includes a budget for the public information team. Total recommended expenditures of $2,567,211 reflect an increase of $173,766 over the current fiscal year based on annual step increases for staff. There are 18 funded positions recommended, which is the same as the current fiscal year. Michelle May, HR Director, is available for any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none.
The next set of budgets for your consideration are the general services budget, which begins on page 393 of the budget book. Total recommended expenditures of $3,961,026 reflect an increase of $430,143, primarily due to the recommended addition of 2 grounds maintenance workers to accommodate the increased number of maintained facilities in the county. There are a total of 24 recommended positions in this budget if the 2 positions are approved. Admin staff are available for any questions.
Did you skip PIT?
No, you included it with human
Oh, you
resources.
intend, okay.
Yes, Tom, yes. Supervisor Wheeler, yes, we took it as part of the human resources. It's
Okay.
10,000 of the.
I was just going to say that, because right after you said the public information team, and then $2.1 million, and I was going to say it's much less than that. Just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
All right. The next budget for your consideration is the utilities budget, which begins on page 413 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $1,006,805 reflect an increase of $36,265 over the current fiscal year, primarily due to higher gas charges. It is important to note that this budget reflects over $200,000 in true-up charges from the Road 28 campus, as the Phase 3 solar expansion has yet to achieve interconnection due to conflict with PG&E. If interconnection is achieved, this budget will partially realize the savings next fiscal year, with the full savings expected in fiscal year 2023-24. Admin staff is available for any questions.
How long has that system been operational? Ready to operate?
It's operating, we're just not getting the PG.
Yeah, we're not getting it. We can't turn it on.
It's been about 5
Right.
years, hasn't it?
So we have to ask general services staff to come in to get us the dates, but my understanding is that the equipment's there, it's built. We are simply waiting on a
That's
equipment
ridiculous.
conflict with PG&E.
Yeah, we need to put some pressure on them, because this is happening all over the state. It's not just here, but somehow we need to put some pressure on PG&E to get that system up and operating, because we're losing money.
Yes, definitely. So in regards to the equipment we're waiting for, we should be, we're being told that August of this year is when we're anticipating that equipment. And then once we get that equipment in and it gets installed, then we should start seeing some of the cost savings that were proposed back when the project started.
Was it some of their required disconnects?
Well, from what I understand is there was what they call a CT cabinet that had been installed and it wasn't up to standard. So then they had to go in and they had to order the cabinet that was actually required, but because of supply and demand and inventory, they haven't been able to get it.
Okay. All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The next budget for consideration is the auditor controller budget, which begins on page 415 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $2,830,476 reflect an increase of $166,360 over the current fiscal year, primarily due to scheduled step increases in the incremental cost of converting a payroll technician position to an account clerk position. There are 21 funded positions recommended, which is the same as the current fiscal year. David Richstone, Auditor Controller, is available for any questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
So Joel, on page 418, under the salaries and employee benefits, 710,500, it says other benefits, $1,200. What is that elected official expense? 710,500
What page?
on 418. I'm just curious. It's it's almost $1,200, but it just kind of stood out. Like, what is that?
You know, I'll take a stab at it, and I believe that's related to the in lieu amount for opting out of the health insurance.
No,
it's not.
no, that's for, I guess, elected officials. They give us $100 a month additional compensation.
I think
in essence.
I think it's in the in lieu
I
amount.
think it was, I don't know if it was only the county-wides, but I know when I was elected, there was an additional $100 a month for, instead of having, I guess it was in lieu of you keeping track of everything that you had to host or people that you had to take to lunch or all those kind of things. So it was pre-existing as of 2015, and it continues, I think, at $100 a month
Okay.
for at least the county-wide electeds.
Countywide, not us.
I-
Okay.
Good question.
I don't know, I haven't been a board member, so I can't answer that for you.
Okay, we don't get that. I just, for the record, we don't get that.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was like, what is that?
Okay.
Is that it? Thank you.
Anything else? Nothing else right now?
No, thank you.
The next budget for your consideration is the assessor budget, which begins on page 421 of the budget book and includes the GIS layer redraw budget. Total recommended expenditures of $3,132,101 reflect a net decrease of $124,374, and it's primarily due to the wind down of the GIS redraw expenditures, which is grant funded. Staff, Brian Glover, assessor, is available for any questions.
Then none.
The next set of budgets for your consideration are the treasurer tax collector budgets, which begins on page 435 of the budget book. Total recommended expenditures of $2,627,495 reflect an increase of $268,908, primarily due to the net addition of 3 positions in this budget. There are 18 total funded positions in the budget, an increase of 3 over the current fiscal year. Tracy Kennedy, treasurer tax collector, is available for any questions.
I don't see her. Oh, you're there. No, that's okay. Thank you. No questions. Thank you.
I get it too. It's on here.
The next set of budgets for your consideration are the county clerk recorder elections budgets, which begin on page 455 of the budget book. Total recommended expenditures of $3,370,453 reflects an increase of $375,868 over the current fiscal year, primarily due to the recommended addition of 2 positions. There are a total of 20 funded positions recommended, an increase of 2 positions over the current fiscal year. Rebecca Martinez, County Clerk Recorder, is available for any questions.
Any questions? Don't see none? Okay.
The next set of budgets for your consideration are the information technology budgets, which begin on page 477 of the budget book. Total recommended expenditures of $10,919,839 reflect an increase of $1,565,000, primarily due to the cost of maintaining the security of the county network and the full implementation of the county VoIP system. There are a total of 28 funded positions recommended, which reflects no increase from the current fiscal year. Tanya Say, Chief Information Officer, is available for any questions.
You guys got a griller for something, don't you? Moving on.
The next set of budgets for your consideration are the Public Works Administration and the Special Districts Administration budgets, which begin on page 511 of the budget book. Total recommended expenditures of $10,092,534 reflect an increase of $1,725,778 over the current fiscal year due to the addition of 4 new positions and transfer of several positions from other public works budgets in this org. There are a total of 65 recommended positions for these budgets, a net increase of 6 over the current fiscal year. Matt Schieber, Chief of Development Services, is available for any questions.
Any questions? Don't see none.
The next set of budgets for your consideration are the Public Works road budgets that begin on page 529. Recommended expenditures of the roads and bridges budget is $38,232,539, which is a $6,660,006 increase over the previous fiscal year for the replacement and rehabilitation of roads and bridges. Scheduled road projects funded by SB 1 and other federal roads and bridge funding. There are 68 allocated positions in this budget. All are funded. This is not a general fund budget. Recommended expenditures for the SB 1 roads and bridges budget are $16,318,762, which is a $3,106,081 decrease from the previous fiscal year. This budget was established last year to accurately account for projects proposed to be completed with SB 1 funds. SB 1 funds have been budgeted in the road fund in previous fiscal years. Recommended expenditures for the roads transit budget are $6,725,113, which is an increase of $2,606,460 from the previous fiscal year based on approved transit projects in the budget year. There are no positions in this budget. This is not a general fund budget. Matt Schieber, Chief of Development Services, is available for questions.
I had a quick question.
Yes.
While Matt's coming up, some time ago we began a process of analyzing how we might eliminate road mileage in the county, and because the inventory is just huge, and of course in District 2 it's bigger than any of the other districts, and roads to nowhere can be ground up and eliminated. We never did really get a full-on response to that, or any movement in that direction. What are your thoughts?
Sure, Supervisor, and I know it's been a discussion point and something that we've struggled with on, nearly the 2,000 miles of county roads within the district. We have looked at those opportunities and we'll continue to do that. Certainly, we have concerns and potential issues with the air district and going back to dirt roads and those things, but to be fair, a lot of these roads, that's what they're going to turn into ultimately.
They almost are some
in
of
some
them
of
now,
those.
yeah.
The board, we brought forth a lot of, vacations of public right-of-ways and roadways, and we continue to work with landowners and property owners in there. We have to ensure access at all times. But we have seen a number of those coming forward. So it is something that we're going to continue to look at and work through. We've been here a lot on some different roads and we do have a sizable, road budget. A lot of this is reimbursement dollars going back to Measure T. So thank you to everyone on our sales tax measure, right? That you see as part of this 38 million is reimbursing going back for Road 200, for Road 26, Avenue 7, Midtown Connector portions as well. So it's something we're going to continue to look at different treatments for those roadways, right, as well.
Yeah. Mr. Robb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Matt, for bringing up the contribution of Measure T. Looking at the numbers, it looks like Measure T ranged anywhere from 25% of total revenues back in 2021 to about a third today. So if anybody is under the illusion that that Measure T doesn't need to be renewed.
Could you imagine what we do without it? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, we wouldn't have the 33 miles in MD-21 without that.
Yeah, and that's just one project, right? We could have an entire afternoon about what Measure T has brought to this county since its inception. And yeah, I mean, you got a third of this budget, and we're in a world of hurt. I mean,
I'd actually like to see a afternoon workshop, just kind of laying out where all the funding comes from for everybody. I think it would be good use of all of our time just to educate people on where it's actually coming from and how dire the straits we're in and what we're able to do.
In fact, Matt, you might collaborate with MCTC because I know that there's going to be two types of outreach. One's going to be just simply outreach that MCTC and the agencies can participate in, and then there's going to be another effort that's going to be more campaign related. But so that might be a good idea as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm assuming not this afternoon, but we will coordinate and schedule.
Nor tomorrow afternoon.
But that's a good point.
I think we need to do it a couple of times before November just to make sure, let the public know with their dollars.
Well, where this funding comes from and how it comes in is, for 12 years I've been both the city and here been trying to figure it out, and it changes every day, and I think we just have to have those kinds of updates, just like we do with trash and everything. It should be yearly, just for people to understand where this is coming from and what's happening with their roads, and that it's not coming from, like you said, this is not a general fund expense. This is all subvented coming and where it's coming from. I think it's important.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to take a 15-minute break now. So guys, step back and go to the bathroom or whatever you need to do.
We are ready.
Ready? Okay, let's get going again. We're on the behavioral health, right? Wrong.
The next budget for your consideration is the Behavioral Health Services budget, which begins on page 547 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $41,223,600 represent a $5,359,223 increase over the current fiscal year, primarily due to an increase in the cost of recommended staff. This budget is 100% funded through state, federal, and other third-party sources with no net county cost. There are 195 allocated positions proposed in this budget, of which all are funded. Pani Moreno Peraza, Director of Behavioral Health, is available for any questions.
Any questions? Don't see none, so for the next one.
The next budget for your consideration is the Public Health budget, which begins on page 565 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $26,727,584 represent a $935,304 increase from the current fiscal year, primarily due to the cost of recommended staff. This budget is 100% funded through state, federal, and other third-party sources with no net county cost. There are 135 allocated positions proposed in this budget, of which 8 are unfunded. Stephanie Nathan, Assistant Director of Public Health, is available for any questions.
Any questions?
Things have changed since 2020, huh?
Thank you. Environmental health?
The next budget for your consideration is the Environmental Health budget, which begins on page 581 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $2,608,664 represent an increase of $830,300 over the current fiscal year. This budget is 100% funded through state, federal, and other third-party sources with no net county cost. There are 15 allocated positions in this budget, of which 1 is unfunded. Matt Trieber, Chief of Development Services, is available for any questions.
Seeing none?
The next budget for your consideration is the Refuse Disposal Liner Fund budget, which is on page 591 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $12,346,008 reflect a decrease of $857,747 from the current fiscal year, primarily due to a decrease in professional and specialized services. There are 4 allocated positions proposed in this budget, all of which are funded. Matt Trieber, Chief of Development Services, is available for any questions.
Seeing none? Public assistance.
The next set of budgets for your consideration are the Department of Social Services budgets, which begin on page 599 of the budget book. This group of budget includes the budget for DSS administration, public assistance, IHSS public authority, and public guardian. Total recommended expenditures of $114,322,741 reflect an increase of $8,475,483 over the current fiscal year, primarily due to the mid-year 2021-22 addition of 26 positions that occurred after adoption of the 21-22 budget. There are a total of 377 positions in this budget, an increase of 7 positions from the adjusted 2021-22 budget, or a cumulative increase of 33 positions when compared to the prior year adopted. Deborah Martinez, Director of Social Services, is available for any questions.
Seeing none?
All right. The next budget for your consideration is the Veteran Services Office budget, which begins on page 643 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $420,831 reflect an increase of $122,624 over the current fiscal year, primarily due to the mid-year funding of a Veteran Services Representative position and the incremental cost of converting an office assistant position to a Veteran Services Assistant position. This recommendation continues your board's ongoing commitment to appropriately fund an important function in the community. Your board has approved the resources needed to allow this department to grow from a part-time contracted VSO and a 1 FTE to 2 FTEs in 17-18 and now 4 FTEs in 22-23. Dr. Stofferson, Veteran Service Officer, is available for any questions.
Yes, Letty.
It's not a question, it's more of a comment, and this comment is not anything new to Jay or Joel, but I'd like to see if there can be some creative ways of assisting the department so they can increase their staffing, because, you know, when you have 7,300 veterans and 460 claims being filed, I know there's a huge need, and so I would just like to see some type of creative funding mechanism to assist. I know I've talked to Connie and, a lot of the folks out there of the subventive departments, the way HR was kind of amped up. I'd like to see that in our Veteran Services Office because there's a huge need and I'm always advocating for that particular department. So I'd like to see that in the future.
Thank you, Supervisor. We will add that to the follow-up items, and we'll work with the subvented departments to see if we
We
can.
owe it to them,
Right.
guarantee you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Letty.
All right. The next budget for your consideration is the Community Action Partnership budget, which begins on page 647 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $324,159 reflect an increase of $16,362 over the current fiscal year based on the actual salary of the CAPMC Executive Director, which was adjusted in the current fiscal year for services for serving as the county's homelessness coordinator. Matty Mendez, CAPMC Director, is available for any questions.
No question.
All right.
Moving on.
Right. The next set of budgets for your consideration are the homelessness grant funding budgets, which begins on page 651 of the budget book. These are new budgets for the fiscal year, and it tracks the recommended expenditures of $955,494, which represents the cumulative amount of homeless housing assistance and prevention funding program, HAP. The county has been awarded to date 3 rounds of funding from this funding source. This budget by no means captures all of the community's efforts to address services for our unhoused citizens. However, it represents the continued financial commitment from the state and the collaborative work that's being done for our community organizations and in coordination with the Fresno Madera Continuum of Care. As additional funding and programs are identified, it is the intent to track receipt and expenditure of grant funds under this dedicated fund and associated budgets. We are available for any questions you may have.
A good deal, so. Moving on.
The next budget for your consideration is the Library Services budget, which begins on page 657 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $2,331,837 reflect an increase of $319,173 over the current fiscal year, primarily due to the addition of 1 position, the incremental cost of creating permanent positions to eliminate the continued use of extra help staffing, and $95,000 in grant funding from the First 5 Madera County for the Raising a Reader program. This budget has 24 funded positions, which is an increase of 10 positions from the current fiscal year, 9 of which was to accommodate the elimination of extra help use. Mr. Riggs, Library Director, is available for any questions.
We should have titled this the award-winning library services.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing a great job. Next.
Right. The next budget for your consideration is the Appropriations for Contingencies budget, which begins on page 663 of the budget book. There are no recommended appropriations for the budget in 22-23 as the county continues to face a projected operating deficit. We are available for any questions.
Seeing none.
The next budget for your consideration is the Cooperative Extension budget, which begins on page 665 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $100,895 reflects an increase of $4,792 based on the county's share of operating costs for the multi-county partnership agreement. Staff is available for any questions on this budget.
Any questions on that? Moving on.
The next budget for your consideration is the Fleet Services budget, which begins on page 671 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $3,833,358 reflect an increase of $714,844, primarily due to the rising cost of fuel and parts. And that's actually the wrong amount. My apologies.
What's the wrong amount?
That's the wrong amount. Yes, the correct budget amount is $7,763,516. The operating budget is $3,833,358, and increased $714,000 due to the increase of fuel and parts. The $3,930,000 difference is related to the Sheriff's Assigned Vehicle Program that we carried over the funds from this fiscal year to next fiscal year. Mike Moss, Chief Civil Deputy, is available for any questions on this budget.
Keep up the good work over there, buddy.
You know your budget well, Joel.
I know. We have the right numbers.
Yeah.
My apologies, Supervisor. What Mike had wanted me to add is that we'd be monitoring, we're closely monitoring the fleet services because what the assumptions we've made on fuel, I think we just
Yeah.
blew that today.
Yeah,
So
I think it's going
depending on
downhill.
where it goes, the first quarter, we might be back with your board with an item to recommend adjusting fleet rates so that way the ISF stays solvent. Right, the next,
I think that's, I mean,
Did
that's
you wanna
something
say
everyone,
something? Come
we're
on
all
up.
doing in our home budgets too right now. I mean, it's, I'm glad it's not this line item at my home budget, but,
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
$113 the other day. You have something you want to say? No. You doing, keep up the good work. Has your gas bill went up quite a bit?
Our fuel cost has almost doubled along with the amount of miles being driven. Because of COVID, a lot of things dropped way off, including the use of fuel, the use of vehicles. But now that people are driving, conducting business normally, they're driving the vehicles more, they need to be maintained more, and then ultimately the fuel costs are just going through the roof.
Oils and everything, yeah.
And the parts now are consistently 35 to 40% more than they were a year and a half, 2 years.
and sometimes it takes longer to get them too.
It is taking quite a bit longer, yes. Anything that has anything to do with electronics right now is on that supply chain problem.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.
Thanks for working on this.
Yeah.
Right.
79.
the next budget for your consideration is the microwave radio service budget, which begins on page 679 of the budget book. Recommended expenditures of $449,881 reflect an increase of $14,516 over the current fiscal year due to increases in the cost of leasing tower space from private landowners and a slight increase in maintenance costs charged by Fresno County and other maintenance agreements. Tanya Say, Chief Information Officer, is available for any questions.
Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the main budget book. We now transition to the special revenue funds, which is the smaller budget book that you have. And we would like to highlight a change that was brought to our attention. Copies will be provided right now on page 60 under the county GSA fee revenue. The change relates to reflecting more in the ending fund balance as opposed to putting all of the balance of funds in appropriations for contingency. All other line items in that budget remain the same. County special revenue funds are the mandated funds to track revenues that have specific restrictions and purposes. These revenues are ultimately utilized in the general fund budgets that were presented to your board. Any requested use of these revenues have already been accounted for in each of the general fund budgets. As such, we are not recommending to present each individual fund, but are rather opening it up for your board and the public to ask any questions pertaining to any of these funds. This concludes our presentation of the special revenue fund budget. Staff from admin office and various departments that monitor these funds are available for any questions.
Okay, has anybody got any questions on any of these? All listed up in front. That's all the money we got left in the tobacco deal is $948.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I mean, we are zeroing that out now and rolling it into, and the project is escaping my mind.
Something.
The jail.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And hopefully we can close it out with this. I think what's been happening is we close it out, but then there's interest that comes in and it's still there. So now
You'll take care of it though, right?
Yeah.
You know, we've used that for a lot of different projects over the years that we've been on this board. Anything else?
No, that's good to me.
Ready?
Are we ready for a motion?
No.
We can't do that yet?
It's after we have our 1:30 meeting, and then that would be the public item.
That's right.
After
That's
that.
right.
Special districts.
Yes.
And I know that it's time for 1 o'clock. I was going to request if it could be 1:30 because you just can't do it before 1 o'clock. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, 1:30.
And Chair, thank you, members of the board. I'd recommend, unless staff thinks otherwise, that you leave this public hearing open until the conclusion of your special district
Right.
hearing, where you can conclude and close both hearings and then decide on an adoption of the resolution there, number 5A, which includes both budgets. And that would help because any changes should be done. They're a lot easier to incorporate into your budget if you make it while the public hearing is open.
Right.
So you can take a break when you choose until 1:30, it sounds like.
Yeah, we'll, unless there's something else, we'll close it down until 1:30 and come back and finish the budget hearings up. Any public comment on that? Seeing none? Break.
Wyatt's got a.
Nope. Now it is. Push the button first. Okay, we're back after lunch. Ready to finish our budget hearings. It's a public hearing, and this is 4A.
Overview and presentation of the 2022-2023 proposed Public Works Special Districts budget with direction as needed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Andrea Saldati, Deputy Director with Public Works. Before you, we have both the roads special districts and the utilities special districts, which encompass water, sewer, roads, streetlights, all of the utilities that we provide. Not much has changed within the districts and the way we prepare the budgets. There are 75 different individual funds in what we call the Blue Book, which is your water and sewer book. That book totals roughly 41.7 million. There are 112 individual funds in the Orange Book, which is your road special districts, and that book totals 13.7 million. We just kind of draw that out so that folks know, you know, special districts takes up a large chunk of money. So we're looking at roughly $55 million within 187 different funds. So we are here for any questions.
How many was in the orange one?
The Orange Book has 112 unique funds.
Okay.
There is some duplication between the Blue Book and the Road Book because some of our roads, they're all combined into one fund. Yeah.
Okay.
I was glad to see that some of those audits of the accounts that we're only bringing in like $500 a year are gone now.
Yes. Yes.
Perfect.
Yep. Yes.
I have just a comment. You might want to double check. So on the Parkwood budget, it still identifies Parkwood as being part of District 4. So you might want to update that when people look at it.
Yes. So we will revise the narratives to accurately reflect the redistricting.
We haven't done that yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. Sound like a winner. Is there any of them that really looks glaring out there that's in the red that we should look at?
There are a handful of districts that are in the red. We do have less districts that are in the red than we did last year. So we are making progress in the right direction. We are still doing rate studies. I'm going to be bringing before your board a handful of them here in the early fall. There are none that are, anything that we have not seen or handled at a time prior. So I don't think there's anything glaring that we need to draw attention to.
Okay. Any other questions from the board members?
Yeah, MD 21, that's going to be in multiple districts now. I believe it's in 3 different districts.
Really?
We'll make sure that the narratives reflect which districts they're in now.
Okay.
With the way they redone our district, you mean, Dave?
What's that?
When they redone our district?
Yeah.
When we did it.
You regulated us?
Yeah.
We redid our.
We did it.
Part that they gave away from me and in great shape.
You lost part of it?
I lost part of it, the part I paved.
Oh.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, in regards to MD 21, yeah, that's now split between District 1 and District 2.
Yeah.
District 1 and
2.
2.
1 and 2.
Last time I checked, we're the board of directors for all of these districts.
Yeah.
I
knew that was coming.
One out, is it?
Right.
For sure, Mr. Rob. Okay, any questions from you guys? More? Okay, none. Any from the public? Any online?
Nobody online.
Okay.
I have a comment. So maybe in the future, I know that this board, and me as a staffer, I've looked at these budgets over the years and the board understands, but maybe in the future we can go over them individually or in a way that is, so there's enough information to the public so they understand. I don't know whether it'd be a workshop or just, in the future.
I think that's a good idea. And
There's
also,
a lot of information on here
Right.
and we've had the ability to look at it, but maybe not necessarily the public.
look at what district they happen to be in too. People will know, so public would know.
It used to be even more confusing before we were able to book the debt, or we were able everything just balanced to zero perfectly. I mean, it was pretty impressive to have this many districts and all of them balanced to zero.
Yeah.
But
Explain
obviously
that to
that's
the people.
that's state law. But yeah, these are some of the most important books I keep in my office.
Me too. Okay, moving on to 5A.
5A, discussion and consideration to adopt a resolution approving the county budgets, including special revenue budgets and special district budgets for fiscal year 2022, 2023.
Any questions on that?
I'll move to adopt the budget, and I'd like to add a codicil to it, just a narrative, and that is to instruct staff to research the cost for funding the removal of Arundel 1 mile each side of the cities.
I don't think we need to put that in there. I think that we need to
Well,
just put that on agenda and work on it at a different time. Better.
It's just direction.
Yeah. Well, the direction's fine, but we're voting now on to approve these budgets, and to direction, we can do that after that.
Okay,
I
that's
think
fine.
that
I
would be
don't
better
care.
myself. I don't know. What do you think, County Council?
Either one would work. If the direction comes after, then it it can still be implemented, so I don't disagree. And I just want to clarify for the record that the hearings have been closed before the roll call vote is taken on any motion that is seconded.
Okay, well, I was going to ask any questions of the public first.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair.
Okay,
I think
Nate?
there
Yeah,
was-
so I'll make the motion to adopt the budget then.
I think under that GSA report, as well as the animal control, I think there was some direction.
Yeah, we gave some direction,
And,
basic direction
as well
during
as
that.
in
So
roads
staff
and-
knows what they need to do.
Right. Okay, we need a
That
second.
highlights it anyway. Thank you.
Second.
Got a second? Any public comment? No comments from the board? Roll call, please. I'll close the public hearing now as of 1:43. Roll call.
Supervisor Rogers?
Yes.
Supervisor Frazier?
Yes.
Supervisor Poitras?
Yes.
Supervisor Gonzalez?
Yes.
Chairman Wheeler?
Yes.
Vote passes 5-0.
Well, we'll adjourn this meeting to tomorrow morning. Start all over again. Got it done.
Excellent.
Excellent.